Spain once held the world in its hands. In the 16th century, it wasn't Britain flying the banner of the largest empire on earth. It was Spain. For the first time in history, a single crown ruled a truly global empire, stretching from Europe to the Americas, from Africa to Asia. Its territories were so vast that people began to say, "The sun never sets on the Spanish Empire," a phrase the British would later borrow. But here's the paradox. The richest empire the world had ever seen collapsed under the weight of its own treasure. And this story still matters today. Because we often mistake sudden floods of money for real wealth. And the crash that follows is always brutal. After 1492, Spain stumbled into what looked like an infinite jackpot. Gold and silver poured in from the New World in quantities Europe had never imagined. In 1521, the conquest of the Aztec Empire opened access to Mexico's rich mines. Soon after, the Inca Empire fell, and Spain unlocked Potosi, a silver mountain so vast it was called the mountain that eats men. For more than a century, treasure fleets crossed the Atlantic non-stop. Between 1500 and 1650, Spain imported an estimated 180,000 tons of silver and 2,000 tons of gold, more silver than Europe had mined in the previous 1,000 years combined. This treasure reshaped the world. Spanish silver flowed through Seville to Europe, across the Pacific to Manila, and into China in exchange for silk and porcelain. The first true global economy was born, and Spain sat at its center. Here's what shocks many people today. When Jamestown was founded in 1607, barely surviving as a swamp settlement, Mexico City already had universities, printing presses, and cathedrals. Lima was a thriving city. St. Augustine, founded by Spain in 1565, was the first permanent European settlement in what is now the United States. Spain wasn't behind. It was decades ahead. And yet, beneath the surface, the empire was hollow. Because Spain confused treasure with wealth. Silver was real. But what Spain did with it turned strength into weakness. Prices exploded. Between 1500 and 1600, inflation ran rampant. Prices quadrupled in a century. Ordinary Spaniards struggled to afford bread and clothing, even as their country sat on mountains of silver. The reason was simple. Money only holds value when it is scarce enough to be trusted. Flood an economy with money, and its purchasing power collapses. Imagine a town where bread costs 1 coin. Suddenly, 10 times more coins arrive, but the number of loaves stays the same. Prices rise, not because bread improved, but because the coins lost value. This was Spain's fate. Historians call it the price revolution, the first great wave of global inflation. And it didn't hit everyone equally. Elites who touched the silver first, nobles, merchants, bankers, benefited before prices adjusted. Ordinary people on fixed wages were crushed. The more silver Spain imported, the poorer its people felt. And the mistakes went deeper. Instead of investing its treasure into productive industries, Spain spent it. Italian merchants, Dutch traders, and German craftsmen grew rich selling goods to Spain, paid for with American silver. Why build factories when you could wait for the treasure fleet? Spain became a consumer, not a producer, while its rivals reinvested everything. Then came the wars. The Habsburg kings saw themselves as defenders of Catholic Europe after the Reformation. That mission carried an enormous price. Silver-funded wars against the Ottomans, financed the suppression of the Dutch revolt, and bankrolled campaigns against Protestant England. Even the Spanish Armada of 1588 was built with New World silver. When it failed, the shock wasn't just military, it was financial. Because Spain wasn't just spending what arrived, it was borrowing against treasure that hadn't yet landed. German banking families like the Fuggers and later Genoese financiers issued massive loans secured by future silver shipments. The system had one fatal flaw. If the silver didn't arrive, Spain defaulted, and default it did, in 1557, again in 1575, then 1596, and 1607. 4 state bankruptcies in half a century, while being the richest empire on Earth. This fragile system attracted pirates. But they weren't random criminals. They were weapons of economic warfare. English and Dutch privateers understood something critical. Hit the treasure fleets, and you collapse Spain's credit. Francis Drake returned to England with plunder worth half the nation's annual revenue. In 1628, Dutch privateer Piet Hein captured an entire Spanish treasure fleet, a single blow that shattered Spain's finances. When a fleet was lost, it wasn't just gold that sank. Future promises sank with it. Meanwhile, England and the Dutch Republic reinvested stolen silver into navies, banks, and trading companies, the foundations of their future empires. Spain's lifeline became its Achilles heel. By the early 1600s, Spain still looked powerful on maps, but financially, it was hollow. Inflation eroded prosperity. Debt chained the crown to foreign bankers. Treasure created fragility, not strength. Spain measured wealth in bullion. Its rivals measured wealth in systems. One was finite. The other multiplied itself. History shows which one survived. And this is not just Spain's story. It's the story of every society that mistakes money for wealth, that floods its economy with currency while hollowing out its foundations. The mechanisms may change, but the pattern remains. The question isn't whether history repeats. The question is whether we recognize the warning in time. If this story gave you a new perspective, subscribe. History doesn't just tell us what happened. It tells us what we can't afford to ignore.